So Year 8 Season 2 is finally here, and you guys want to know what the best defenders are moving forward in the new season of Siege. Well, in this video, we're going to be doing a tier list of every single one of the defensive operators in Rainbow Six Siege, including the brand new one, Fenrir. So if you guys go on to enjoy this video, please sure leave a like, subscribe. Without wasting too much of your time, let's jump straight into it with Alibi. Starting off then with Alibi, I think she is a solid A tier operator. She has a great loadout. Her gadgets can be useful for gathering intel. The only real downside to an Alibi, and the only thing stopping her from becoming an S tier, is it's quite easy to identify which ones of her gadgets are fakes and which one is obviously going to be her. With that being said, moving on, next we have Aruni. I think she's going to be another A tier operator. I think she's actually better than Alibi because she's really useful for taking up the attacker's utility and wasting their time when entering key areas of the map. Put these down on all the doorways that you need to, and she is going to be very useful to your team. The only real downside to an Aruni is her only fully automatic weapon is going to be the Roni, so if you're not good with that weapon, stick with the DMR. But that's not even a downside because the DMR is still quite good. Next up then, we have Azami. Azami is going to be the first operator in the S tier category. In my opinion, she is one of the most versatile operators in the game. I'm surprised Ubisoft didn't nerf her moving into this season because she is literally that good. If you're not playing Azami right now, play her. She is great for holding down areas of the map and making unique defensive angles. Next up then, we have Bandit. In my opinion, Bandit is going to be an A tier operator. He's always going to be useful for obviously denying that hard breach, but he doesn't do his job as well as a Kaid, and Kaid is just a little bit stronger than a Bandit, so he's going into S tier as well. Now, if you guys don't know how to Kaid trick and Bandit trick, I'd highly recommend searching up how to do that in a YouTube video, and that will take your operators to a next level. With that being said then, moving on, we now have a Castle. Castle's a very hit or miss operator. If you're a good Castle and put your Castle barricades in good places, he can be the difference between winning and losing a round. But if you're a bad Castle and you put your Castle barricades in the wrong doorways, you can actually be more of a hindrance to your team, stopping roamers from getting back to objective and stuff like that. So if you're not too good at the game, don't play Castle because 9 times out of 10, you're probably going to be hindering your team more than helping it. So with those things in mind, I'm going to put Castle into B tier. Moving on into our next operator, we now have Caveira. Now for me, Caveira is a C tier operator. I think she is good when you can get interrogations off, but it is more likely that while trying to get an interrogation off, you're going to get shot by another attacker, and then you're not really going to be giving any intel to your team, and the person you've downed and tried to interrogate, it's just going to get revived again. However, with that being said, if you're a good Caveira player and you can get those interrogations off, she can be a very strong addition to the team, because if you do get an interrogation off, obviously you bring a lot of intel to your team, knowing exactly where all the attackers are that are still alive. Next up then, moving on from Caveira, we have Clash, and Clash is the only F tier defender on this list. In my opinion, Clash is only really good for one thing, and that is for slowing down the attackers that are trying to push down long hallways. Now on certain maps, she can be somewhat useful, especially when paired with barbed wire, but 9 times out of 10, she's not really going to be that useful, and playing as any other operator in the game is going to be more helpful to your team. Moving on from Clash then, we now have Doc. For me, Doc is just another A tier operator. The ability to heal teammates on defense is always going to be useful. Also, it allows him to revive people that are down from a long distance while not putting himself at risk, and obviously he can also stim any operator up in the game with just one shot now, so he can be very strong for healing his teammates up to full HP, who can then go on to win gunfights. Next up then, we have Echo. Echo, for me, is not that great of an operator. If it was my personal opinion, I'd put him in B tier, but I know for a fact Echo has a lot more potential than that, so he's also going into the A tier category. His drones can bring a lot of intel to that defensive team, and even after he dies, him or his teammates can go on those drones and still give callouts, which is always going to be a useful point of Echo. And obviously he can also stop the plant from happening without even having to risk his own life. So for me, that is why Echo goes into A tier. Moving on, we now have Ella, who for me is another B tier operator. Now for me, whenever I seem to play Ella, I don't really find that her gadgets can be that useful. Whenever I play her, I feel like she's more useful as like a intel gathering gadget now, where you can hide them around the map, and if they get detonated, you then know when they're pushing from. I feel like the stun capability of her gadget's been nerfed so much over the years that it's not really as useful as it once was, and that is why she's staying in beta. Next up then, we have the brand new operator Fenrir, and I'm sure all you guys are curious as to where I'm going to place them on this list. And in my opinion, even though the season hasn't been out for too long, I think he's going to be a great addition to the defensive team. I think he has definite uses for that defensive team. He can catch attackers off guard, he can limit their vision and take them out without them even being able to challenge back properly, and on top of that, he's also just very useful for gathering intel. Obviously, you're going to be able to give incredibly accurate callouts when his gadgets get detonated, and it's going to give you a great idea of where those attackers are going to be pushing from. On top of that, Fenrir has a great loadout. The MP7 is a great weapon for the defensive team. High fire rate, manageable recoil. He's going to be a great option for the defensive team. With that being said then, moving on, we now have Frost. I really hope that next season the Frost rework doesn't go through, because I think she's in a good spot. I think this rework is more of a nerf, and I don't see Frost as that good of an operator right now. I think she's just a solid B tier operator. If the attackers gain the ability to self-revive out of her Frost mats, I think it's going to really hinder her pick rate, and moving forward, her pick rate decreasing will only drop her down to a C tier operator, and I really don't want that to happen. With that being said then, let me know your opinions on that Frost rework down in the comments. Next up, we have Goyo. Now for me, Goyo is going to go at the top of B tier, because personally, I don't really use his gadgets in the most appropriate places, and I never really find myself getting the most out of them, but I know for a fact that Goyo has high potential. So play Goyo, see if you are good at him. If you're not good at him, try and avoid him. If you're someone who seems to do very well as Goyo, then he could be the perfect operator for you, because you've got to have a specific kind of playstyle to get the most out of him. Next up then, after Goyo, we're going to be having a look at Jager. Jager's going straight into A tier. He's always going to be a useful addition to that defensive team, obviously eating up attackers' utility, saving you from frag grenades and stuff like that. The only downside is the fact that there's going to be a recharge time on his Jager ADSs, and they can be burnt very easily using stun grenades. But even with that knowledge, I think Jager is still going to be an A tier operator, and I think he's going to stay that way no matter how much Ubisoft like it. Next up then, we have Kapkan, and Kapkan is an insanely easy operator to play, and in my opinion, he is another operator that's going into S tier. I don't care what you guys say, Kapkan is going to be S tier, because you have the potential of taking out an attacker without even having to risk anything. If you can get a free kill with a Kapkan, it's going to make that entire round so much easier for your team. And on top of that, he has a great loadout as it is. He has a C4 if he wants it, or he has impacts to help set up sight. I don't see any negatives when bringing a Kapkan, and that is why he's known as a crutch operator, because he's literally that easy to play. Next up then, after Kapkan, we're going to be having a look at Lesion. Legion's another solid intel gathering operator, while also allowing you to slow down the attackers when pushing the objective. So for me, he's a good operator going straight into the A tier. I love the fact that he has a T5 SMG as well. Always going to be a good weapon for the defensive team. Next up then, we have Maestro. In my opinion, he's a low B tier operator, kind of verging on C tier, but once again, an operator that I don't typically play, so I would find it a bit harsh if I put him in C tier, just because I don't play him all that much. But I know for a fact a good Maestro cam can be very good intel gathering for the defending team. Let me know where you would put Maestro, because he's probably the one operator that I struggled with placing the most in this entire list. But next up, we now have Melusi. Now for me, Melusi is a top of B tier operator, one of the more useful trap operators in the game, and for me, she's just that good because she can slow down the attacking team, which is obviously just going to make it a lot easier. Now the main reason I keep bringing up the fact that you can slow down the attacking team is because that is the real aim of the defending team. You know, you don't really want to kill all 5 attackers. You want to waste as much of their time as possible, so that when they eventually do reach the objective room, they have as little time as possible to clear it out and plant. Moving on from Melusi then, we now have Mira. In my opinion, Mira has the single most influence on a game, out of all of the defenders in the game. So for me, she's going into A tier. She can be an S tier operator on certain maps. Once again, it all depends on how you set up the mirrors. A good mirror placement can literally win you rounds. So if you're someone who is looking to play mirror more often, look up guides on how to play mirror, where to set up her mirror placements on specific maps, and I have a feeling that this operator could be the operator to take you higher in your rank this season. After Mira then, we now have Mozzie, another A tier operator. I feel like there's so many options on the defensive team. You have a lot more wider variety, whereas on attack, there's more specific metas. I feel like most of these operators in A tier are going to be a great pick. And the reason why Mozzie is a great pick is because he can take away utility from the attacking team and intel, and then he can use that gadget for himself to gather intel, to make callouts. And even after he or his teammates die, once again, they're going to be able to use those drones to make more callouts. So for me, Mozzie is going to be another great operator going into Year 8 Season 2. Next up then, we have Mute. And Mute is an operator that I've slowly seen climbing this tier list. And for me, this time around, he's actually going to be going into A tier because he kind of does the job of a bandit, but slightly better. And he's slightly more versatile because obviously he gets more gadgets than a bandit does. And those gadgets can also stop drones from going through key areas of the map, stopping intel gathering for the attacking team and making that attacking team take longer to sweep through each room, making their way to the objective. So for me, Mute is going to be an A tier operator. Keep an eye on him because I can see him going up to S tier in the near future. He's just so versatile at the moment, and I'm very interested to see how he develops this season. Moving on then from Mute, we now have Oryx. Oryx is an operator that has definitely fallen out of the meta since he lost his 1.5. He's really only going to be useful for roaming, other than the fact that he can be somewhat useful for setting up sight because he has the option of taking the bailiff pistol. Once again, I don't really see too much of Oryx since he lost his 1.5, so it's very hard for me to rank him this season. The T5 SMG is going to be good nonetheless, with or without that 1.5 times scope, but I just don't see him being an A tier pick because all these operators above him, in my opinion, are going to be better picks than him. With that being said then, moving on, we now have Pulse. Pulse is also going to go into the B tier. He can be an A tier operator on specific maps, but it all depends on which objectives you get because playing on a basement objective is going to allow you to C4 up through the floor on anyone trying to play vertically like a sledge or a buck. Or if you're playing on an objective where he can be playing in basement, he can then C4 up through the floor on anyone trying to plant. So he can be a strong operator. It all depends on what objectives you got and how much of an opportunity you have to utilize that C4. Next up then, we now have Rook. Rook's going to be a always decent pick for the attacking team. Obviously, anyone who picks up his armor is now granted the ability to self-revive. Always going to be useful if you can get it off. On top of that, Rook himself gets a great loadout and he has impact, so he can set up the site for the attacking for the defending team as well. Moving on then from Rook, we have another interesting one. We have Smoke. Now for me, Smoke was in A tier. With the loss of his shield, I feel like it really shakes up the way people can play Smoke now, because what people used to do is play Smoke with his shotgun and then run the SMG-11 as a secondary, play behind his shields, use his smoke canisters to keep people back, and if they did push up through the smoke, he could use his shotgun up close. But without his shield being there anymore, he's going to have to rely on someone else bringing a deployable shield, or he's not going to have one at all. And for me, that's going to cause a lot more Smoke players to not play with the shotgun and play with the SMG, which is really going to shake up his playstyle. So for me, I think I'm going to keep him in A tier just because of what his gadget can do, but I'm interested to see how he develops this season once again. Next up then, we have Solace. Now, I see a lot of people saying Solace is very overpowered. I don't personally see it. I don't really play Solace too much because I don't like the recoil that the P90 has. For me, I'd put her at the top of B tier, but I know for a fact a lot of people are going to complain and say she's an A tier operator as well, but I'm not going to listen to you guys. I'm sorry. I'm going to keep Solace in B tier. I personally don't see what the hype is about. That is a very controversial opinion, I assume, but moving on, next we have Tachanka, which is going to be another C tier operator. For me, his gadget really needs to be focused on by Ubisoft, because when trying to use his Shumika launcher, it's very hard to get a good placement of the fire. Yes, it can can be strong if put down in the correct position, but it's so hard to put them down where you want them because of how much they bounce and stuff like that. I've seen people say that there should be a toggle on it on if it bounces or instantly deploys like a capital bolt, and honestly I love that idea. I think Ubisoft should look into testing with that and seeing how it affects him and his pick rate. With that being said then, where would you place Tachanka? But moving on, let's have a look at Thorn. Thorn is going to be another B tier operator. I feel like once again she can be useful if you can get a free kill with a Thorn gadget. Obviously that's going to be great, but I feel like it's a lot easier to avoid than a Kapkan gadget because Kapkan can instantly take someone out of the game, whereas a Thorn gadget, it deploys and you have a chance to escape it, and 9 times out of 10 you do have enough time to escape it unless it's set up in a specific kind of area. Next up then we have Thunderbird, another healing operator for the defensive team. I think she's going to go in B tier. She's not as good as a Doc. If you want healing, just play Doc instead. In my opinion, she has worse loadout than Doc as well, so for me she's just slightly worse than Doc in every category, so she's going to have to go on the tier below him. Next up then we have Valkyrie, always going to be an A tier operator, and in fact I think she's going to be an S tier operator moving forward this season because setting up Valk cams is just going to be a great way of gathering intel for your team. The MPX has no recoil whatsoever, so any beginners looking to play the game, experiment with Valkyrie because I think you guys are going to enjoy playing her. Let me know if you agree with that Valkyrie placement. Next up we have Vigil. In my opinion, it pains me to say because I do love Vigil at heart, but I think he's a B tier operator. I don't think his gadget is too useful anymore. I think they need to make it more stealthy than it currently is. Obviously it gives you that visual ping when a Vigil is nearby. I think they need to remove that and only keep it for when he's reinforcing and stuff like that, which they have done, I must say. For me, I just can't put him any higher than a B tier, other than the fact that he does get impacts to set up sight and his primary weapon option is very good. With that being said then, we have our last two operators. We have Wamai, which is kind of similar to a Jager but slightly worse in my opinion, other than the fact it gets a 1.5 times scope. So for me, top of B tier or low A tier operator. And then we have Warden, who I feel like is only getting picked a lot recently because of his 1.5 times scope. I have a feeling Ubisoft could potentially be nerfing that and taking it away from him. I think he's going to be a B tier operator this season. So with all of that said, this is my final tier list. Let me know where you agree with, which operators do you disagree with. Let me know everything you think about it down in the comments. If you guys enjoyed, leave a like, subscribe if you guys want more. I can do an attacker tier list in the next few days if you guys want to, but until then I'll see you guys in the next one. Click the video on screen and goodbye.